What's up, world? I'm Willie. These troubling times. Start with all that. What's up, world? I'm Willie. I'm an alcoholic. Hell, where to start now? I mean, you know, hi, I'm Willie. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is December 17th, 2011. Currently on step 10 in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. And my sponsor works the steps, and recovery has given me everything that I have today. What can I say? It really is amazing to be able to be on this side of the table and be sober and be grateful for being sober and be grateful for my past. That's not something that I've always been able to do, is be grateful. And so, I want to go back. I used and I drank my whole life. I mean, for as long as I could remember, I used and I drank. And, it started with, really elementary, just dabbling in stuff. When I was a kid, it wasn't uncommon for adults to be giving us alcohol and letting us take cigarettes and stuff like that. But we would take beers and we would take cigarettes and we'd go down to the forest and we would drink, and it was just always there. It was just always a part of everything that I did. And, one of the things that I remember as a kid is that, I always really wanted to belong somewhere. I never really felt like I belonged anywhere. And so being really sensitive to other people's energies, I would gravitate towards whatever high energy situation was around me. And it's always kind of been that way. I've been really sensitive to what people's emotions are and what people are going through. And I was always that kid in school where, like if you started laughing, I started laughing louder. If you were trying something, I tried it harder. If things were hard, I would quit. And if things were easy, I wouldn't want to do it. So, I was kind of a mess. And I think I probably had ADHD growing up. It's just, they never diagnosed that kind of stuff. When I was a kid, kids got to be kids. And I rode my bike without a helmet and ran around stealing shit from grocery stores and being nervous around girls and having that nervous disposition. And uh, I, I started young, fifth, sixth grade, I was smoking regularly. I started smoking as soon as I could light cigarettes, but by fourth, fifth grade, I was smoking regularly, getting in trouble. By sixth grade, I was, smoking pot. Seventh, eighth grade, it was common. I was already getting in trouble, getting arrested by ninth grade. Crimes are a big part of my story, and I had a lot of problems. They'd been trying to get me sober for a long time, even before I think I was an alcoholic. And so as time moved on, I became alcoholic. I didn't mean to become alcoholic, but I did. And I say that I'm alcoholic because I use and I drink when I have every reason not to. And once I start, I cannot stop without some type of help. And I came in and out of sobriety so many times, in and out, and tried it. And every time I'd go to jail, which was a lot, I have over 20 arrests on my record. A lot of them are for like probation violations on the same crimes and stuff like that. But that, they were all drug and alcohol related. Whether I got a charge for drugs and alcohol, the crime was incited by drugs and alcohol. Either I was getting and finding ways and means to get more, or I was intoxicated or something. I never went to jail sober, not ever. And so, drugs and alcohol turned me into a person that I didn't want to be, and I didn't mean to become that way. So, from the time I was a little kid until I was 33 years old, I tried to use drugs and alcohol as the solution for my problem. The problem was I couldn't deal with life on life's terms, and I couldn't deal with myself on a regular basis. I didn't have any direction. I didn't have any belief in myself. I didn't have any belief in the world around me. I constantly tried to believe in a God that wasn't mine for help. I lied, manipulated. I didn't know how to be honest with anybody. I cheated on everybody I was with. And I tried to take anything from out there to put in here to make this feel better. And for a long time, the drugs and alcohol worked. They would numb me out to the world around me, and they'd make my problems not seem as bad. On June 27th, 2011, I was knotted out in a rest stop in Utah, between Ogden, Utah, and Evanston, Wyoming. I had come down to Utah from Wyoming to pick up some drugs, and the drug deal went bad. I gave my friend some money to go and run. The money wasn't mine in the first place. He ran to go get the dope. I never saw him again. He ended up stabbing somebody that night and went to prison. And I spent the next couple of days trying to scrape together some gas money, trying to find him, do stuff like that. Now, I am a meth addict and I am a heroin addict. And at the time I had heroin, but I didn't have any meth. And so I needed to get some sleep. While we were down here, we decided we're going to steal some groceries, and went to a grocery store and tried to leave with a basket full of groceries. When I'm out there, everything is mine. Everything is up for grabs, and I don't pay for anything. I pay for, when it comes to spending money, I spend my money on drugs, gasoline, and cigarettes. And that's because those are the three things that I can't really steal that well. If I can get away with any of those things, then I'll steal them, because everything must go to my disease. Everything must go to the monster. And so we went to that grocery store. When you put hands on a theft prevention officer, it turns from shoplifting to strong arm robbery. Now it's a violent crime, and the cops were looking for me for a violent crime. I fell asleep at that rest area trying to get back home, and I never made it. I woke up with the yelling of an officer next to my window with a gun pointed in my face, screaming to wake up. And he was putting me under arrest for strong arm robbery. I had drugs on me and was being looked for. I was surrounded by 4 different law enforcement agencies. It was the Utah Highway Patrol, Morgan County Sheriff, Weber County Sheriff, and the Ogden City Police Department. And they arrested me that day. And I went back to jail again at age 33 for the same shit I was doing when I was a teenager. I had been broken, you guys. Like the thing of my life was I was just so tired of hating myself. I was tired of living in that life of desperation, but I didn't know any other way to live. I'd been in and out of the rooms, but I didn't believe that I could get sober. I didn't believe that I could be the one to grab a hold of a program that could change my life for the better. I didn't know that I could be the voice of inspiration. I didn't know that I could be the voice of reason and have sanity restored to me. I didn't have belief in myself, and I needed to find that in the lowest places possible. And so, that day I went to jail. I've never forgotten the sound of that cop's voice, and I'm never forgetting the look in his eyes, because that day, it wasn't the first time that I had a gun pulled on me. It was the last time I had a gun pulled on me. And as I looked down the barrel of that gun into that officer's eyes, I could see that he was absolutely 100% ready to put me down if he needed to. And I look back at that moment and I can see that that is what I like to call my moment of incomprehensible demoralization, because that cop could see me for exactly what I was at that time. He would have shot me if he needed to in the duty of law and protecting the society in which I just ravaged to death with my disease. He could see that I was the guy that would, take advantage of his daughter. I'm the guy that would steal his mother's purse. I'm the guy that would break into his garage or his neighbor's garage. I'm the guy that would sell his kids drugs or, have an affair with his wife. I was the guy that had no morals or standards. And I was the guy that was dangerous, driving intoxicated everywhere that I went. And he could see me for exactly what I was at that time. And if he would have put me down, if he would have shot me that day, he would have shot me in honor of his duty to protect society against people like me. And I would have ended up on the news as a drug addict, dead, shot by an officer, wanted for a violent crime. I wouldn't be this person that's sitting here today sober. So I'm very grateful for that moment in my life. I'm very grateful for the clarity that's come around because of that. I went to jail and I ended up spending 5 months in jail that time. And because I was in a different state and the judges didn't know me and the officers didn't know me, I was able to kind of ride through under the radar. And I wanted to finally get sober. I had to kick in jail this last time. I was strung out on heroin, meth. I was taking a lot of prescription pain medication and drinking a lot, and so I was trying to numb the voice of hatred that I had inside of me. But as I said, they were trying to get me sober most of my life. And so I was familiar with programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and programs like Narcotics Anonymous. I was familiar with churches and prayer and, leaning on people and that kind of stuff. I was never in my life truly hated by other people. I was always pretty much generally loved. I was just hated by myself. I never saw myself the way that other people saw me. I never saw myself as a good person. I never saw myself. All I could really ever see in me were the flaws. I don't know why I got that. Maybe it's perfectionism. Maybe it's a delusion of self, but I never felt right sized. I either always felt way better than or way less than everybody else around me. And usually the latter. I usually felt way less than. And so when I went to jail this last time, which is almost 10 years ago now, I sat in there and I read the solution in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous again. I did that 5 months, and I say that I'm alcoholic because I use and I drink when I have every reason not to, but also because in the literature that I read, I could identify with the different ways of trying to stop, the different outcomes of my, spurts and sprees of alcoholism. I could recognize the destruction that they talk about in the literature of AA and NA. I could see that every time I tried to stop, it was in vain. I would delude myself into thinking I could only drink beer or just smoke pot, or I could put a timeline on how long I could go without it and reward myself later. Or, I could try to convince myself that I needed a certain medication or this type of therapy or this relationship, or I needed to move to this place or that place. There were so many different ways that I tried to stop. It took me a long time to really dive in and grab a hold of the spiritual aspect of this illness. I knew that I was powerless over using and drinking. I had heaps and heaps of evidence piled up against me on that, because every time I took a drink, I took another drink, whether it was a moment after that drink or a day after that drink. And once I started drinking, everything else came back into my life. All the drugs, all the violence, all the low standards, and all the bad things that I didn't really want came back into my life every time that I took a drink. And every time I took a drink, the physical compulsion to continue to drink continued in me until I get arrested. There's no stopping it for me. It overcomes me completely. I struggled with me understanding and admitting that that's a spiritual problem. And part of the reason for that is because I don't necessarily have a solid belief in a spirit. When I think about a spirit, I think about a ghost living inside of me, and this thing that is me but not me. And so how can a ghost be sick? How can a ghost be imperfect or any of that stuff? But as I went through this process, starting way back 10 years ago with step one with another alcoholic, I've had an amazing spiritual journey. And a lot of the reason that I call this a spiritual journey is because I don't know what else to call it. I don't know how else to define the non-physical part of my life today. There's so much that happens that I can't explain, that I can't put a finger on where it comes from or why I get it. So I come in today sober humbly because I couldn't do it on my own. If I could have gotten myself sober at any stage of this life that I've had in active addiction, I would have done it, because there was enough pain, enough times that there was enough toilet bowl prayers and back seats of cop cars. There was enough bloody noses and broken knuckles that I had said those prayers over and over again. God, help me not do this again. God, help me not do this again. And if I could have done it on my own, I would have, because I could see the hurt in the people's eyes around me. I could feel that. If I go all the way back to when I was a kid, I'm sensitive to people's energies. I'm sensitive to people's emotions. And when I hurt someone, I know it. And because they love me, I hurt them through hurting myself. And so I wanted to change all that stuff, you guys. I wanted to change the way I treated the people around me. I wanted to change the way that I saw myself. I wanted to fix the things that I had broken. I wanted a different way of living. One of the things that I do believe that I don't really struggle with is that I have one life. I have this one life, that I have one chance at this life, and that I had an entire life of using and drinking. I know what that life is like. I know what that life is about. I know what the street game is and the drug game, and I know how to sell dope, and I know how to fight, and I know how to run, and I know how to hide, and I know how to hustle and all that shit. And I know that it leads me nowhere. And I fear, like, if I would have died that day from that officer or any other day in active addiction, my life would have been wasted. I'm very fortunate to be able to have two lives in one lifetime. What I've been able to do and participate in is a wild ride of ups and downs in sobriety. Finding myself, rediscovering who I am, redefining who I am, letting go of things that don't work for me, grabbing a hold of new ideas, all these things that make me who I am today. I lived most of my life in fear, and I didn't know that until I did an honest and thorough 4-step. In that 4-step, I was able to line out my resentments that I had, which were many. I was able to identify my fears, which were many. And I was able to really dial in and look at my sexual conduct and relationships in general, in the way that I treat people and the way that I have a selfish nature that drives everything that I think about, that drives me completely against my fellow man, because I'm always worried about me. That is my disease. And so being on this side of the table, I'm able to grab a hold of a program and be around people that teach me how to be selfless instead of selfish. The selfish part of this is what keeps me away from you. It's what keeps me from believing in myself. It's what keeps me from believing in God. It's what keeps me from believing that I can have and do things that are wonderful in this life. And so, getting rid of or identifying those fears was huge for me, and moving into being able to identify a power that's greater than myself, that a concept that works for me, that I get to play around with. I want to share a little bit about God and my journey with God, because when I got here 10 years ago, I tried to rely on a God that was given to me at birth. And when we first started this show, I came into this show agnostic atheist. I had no evidence to believe in a power greater than myself. I was I had several years sober when we first started the podcast, and I was atheistic at the time. I did a lot of spiritual work, and what I came to the conclusion of is that there doesn't really have any evidence to prove the existence of God. Most things could be summed up by coincidence or self-will. Just if I changed my psyche and thought a different way, I could, manipulate my world around me. And what it ended up being was alcoholism at its greatest, me relying on me and me giving myself what I can do for myself, which ended up ultimately at almost 10 years, this was a few months ago, at almost 10 years, completely consumed by untreated alcoholism. I don't have to take a drink to live in alcoholism. I don't have to take a drug to be living like an addict. I have to be completely consumed with myself. And if I'm completely consumed with myself, I'm living in untreated alcoholism. Untreated alcoholism affects everybody in my life negatively, including myself. And so as I went through my period of atheism, I was able to let go of the concepts that I was given at birth, which was a Christian type God. And I tried for a very long time to believe in that God. I heard many times in the rooms and in sobriety in general, fake it till you make it, and which is probably one of the most insulting things that I can hear in sobriety, because I don't get to fake my sobriety. I don't get to fake my recovery. I have to be 100% genuine about this. And when I came to the conclusion that I don't believe in the God that my parents gave me at birth, I thought that I didn't believe in God. I thought that meant that I had one shot at one God. And if I don't believe in that God, then I don't get a God. And if I don't get a God, then I better figure out how to do this on my own with the help of other people. And as I went through that journey, I was able to let myself down without using and drinking, to come to a full understanding that the drugs and alcohol are not the problem. The drugs and alcohol were the solution, right? When I'm able to live alcoholically without taking a drink, when I'm able to be as selfish as I was sober as I was when I was drinking, what am I to do with that? What am I to do with an understanding that it really is me that's broken, that it's not a chemical, that it's not a substance, that it's not a situation, that it's me? What am I to do with that? As I dove in and I started reading through the literature in a very dark place, I got pretty sick, and I ended up almost checking myself into a hospital. And this is with years of sobriety, you guys. This is with me on my journey. I almost checked myself into a hospital. I wanted to get medications. I wanted to change the way that I felt. And what I ended up doing was asking for somebody to pray with me for the first time in a lot of years. And so I humbled myself again before the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the principles that are laid before me. And those 3 key steps that say, A, I'm alcoholic, and I could not manage my own life. And I ended up in that place in sobriety. I ended up in that place without taking a drink, alcoholic and unmanageable. B, probably no human power could relieve my alcoholism. I did everything in that dark space that I did for the prior 4 years that worked. I meditated, I exercised, I ate well. I talked about it in meetings. I met with other alcoholics. I worked, I paid my bills. I tried to alleviate it through sex and food, which is not uncommon. I could not get out of that dark space with your help and I could not get out of that dark space on my own. And so I considered the spiritual as as a solution to my mind, and became willing to believe in a power that was greater than myself. I came willing to believe that there is a God and I'm not it. Right. And so no human power could relieve my alcoholism. Not you, not me, not the group. Those things help, but it did not relieve my alcoholism. And see, God could and would if he were sought. And I dove really deep this time into trying to understand what the people in recovery talked about when they said, you can have your own conception of God. You can have your own conception of a power greater than yourself. What does that mean for you? And I had to ask myself, Willie, what does that mean for you? What does it mean for me to have my own conception of God? Does that mean I get to make a God up? Does that mean that I get to control that God? Right? Any of those things. And I came to a place where I understand that my life in sobriety is a gift given to me by grace. It's given me as just because that's what it does. I had to humble myself before my disease and accept that I am loved, that it's okay that I'm flawed and that I'm human, that I will always be alcoholic and that I will always struggle with this type of stuff, but I have a solution for it. You know, grace is a very, very strange thing for me. It's only now that I'm even beginning to understand grace. You know, if there is a God that had created me to have a relationship with me, that wants me to be happy and have all these experiences, and that all those toilet bowl prayers and all those backseat prayers and all those promises that if you get me out of this one and get me out of that one, and God, please help me stay sober, led me up to a place where today I am sober for almost 10 years. And I deny the fact that I'm sober and could not do it on my own. Who am I to say that there is no God and that all those things did not add up to what I am today? By the grace of God, I sit here. And when I say grace, I talk about a grace that I understand. I talk about a grace that works for me, a concept that for some reason I finally grabbed a hold of, because in sobriety, I've been able to do some amazing things. You know, I started a family. My children have never seen me drunk. I have a home and a career, this podcast, amazing people in my life, platform around people around the world that I respect and that I love. I have these relationships that are unbelievable. And I have the grace of a power that's greater than myself. And when I talk about that grace, I use this analogy that I heard from another alcoholic. And he said, the grace of God is like a mother breastfeeding her child. That's just what she does. There's no expectation of return. There's no demand for anything else. She just feeds her child because she loves her child. And that's why I'm here today. I'm here sober by the grace of God, because that's what God does. God gets guys like me sober and gives me a program like this. So, you know, thank you for letting me share. Thank you for all the support on the show. Thank you for, you know, everybody that shared and, you know, all the encouragement. I could not have done any of this without you. So, yeah, thank you.